You're on CYInterview.
I'm Chris Shandick, featured columnist Jay Bilstein is with me today on CYInterview. We welcome NFL journalist Maurice Moton. Maurice writes articles for the Bleacher Report and VegasSportsToday.com. There's been a lot to discuss about the Las Vegas Raiders over the last week, and you also got to follow him on Twitter at Mo Moton. Maurice, thanks for joining us on CYInterview. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for being with us today, Jay.
Maurice, it has been quite a 10-day span in the kingdom of the silver and black. So I want to hop into that, specifically dealing with the resignation of Jon Gruden and everything that led up to that. And I want to do it by backing into it with two articles. The first article was an article that I saw, I believe it was a couple of days ago, in the New York Post, with a headline that said, Katie Couric, I withheld RBG, referencing Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the former late Supreme Court Justice. I withheld RBG's harsh anthem-kneeling comments to protect her. And then I want to go to an article yesterday from Yahoo Sports with the title, Derek Carr suggests NFL open up everything in team correspondence after Jon Gruden resignation. And what these two articles kind of brought to my mind was, what lurks out there in the world of professional sports, not simply in terms of the Raiders, not simply in terms of the NFL, but in professional sports in general? And should we now be undergoing a kind of complete transparency across the board for players, for coaches, for front office people to see how they communicate and what they've communicated? And if we don't do that, who decides who should be looked at? And what should be the appropriate penalties when people do things that are offensive, transgressive, and obviously not where I think most people would like society to head?
Wow, that's a big question there, but I think we should open it up. I mean, Derek Carr suggested it. I'm not naive. None of us here are naive to think that Jon Gruden is the only person who has some disparaging things to say about female referees and queers and maybe some anti-slurs and sexist and misogynistic comments. He's not the only one. And I believe if we pull back the curtain of the NFL and the conversations that officials and coaches and owners have, we will find that Jon Gruden, again, is not the only person. Now, the issue is, now, if we do find this out and emails and more emails do leak, how do we reprimand these people? And I don't think the NFL is ready to force 8 to 10 owners, just picking a random number here, 8 to 10 owners, forcing them to sell their team or firing coaches because of these conversations, because it will make the NFL as a whole look like a toxic league. So with this investigation going into the Washington football team, basically we're getting just bits and pieces of what people have said. I know a report recently came out about a top NFL lawyer, Jeff Pash, and Bruce Allen, who Jon Gruden was also communicating with. They had some disparaging things to say about Latinos and certain players and their salaries, talking about basically lowering a player's salary, making that a joke. Just having jokes about a person's living is not a lasting matter, and just to see that is disheartening. But again, I'm not naive to think that these conversations don't happen among a lot of other high-ranking officials, coaches, team presidents. I'm not naive to think that it doesn't happen. I think that this needs to open up, because then we'll get to kind of see how certain groups of people are portrayed in these offices and through emails, through communication. I think that's very important. But as far as punishment is concerned, Jon Gruden got the consequences he deserved. When it comes to other owners and maybe coaches, I would say that they also deserve to serve consequences too. But the NFL, I don't think, is ready to do that, because, again, it would make the NFL as a whole look like a league of just toxic people and people in power, which is which is quite, again, disheartening because you think these are the guys that do the hiring, these are the guys that make the big decisions, and they had to see that they have these thoughts. You wonder how certain people don't get opportunities and how some people kind of shut out of the pipeline. And I think that's important to think when you think about, why doesn't the NFL have more African-American minority coaches? Why doesn't the NFL have more minority people in places of power? So you think about that and you kind of tie it to what you talked about in these reports, and you're not surprised about why some of these people are shut out of the hiring processes of some of the highest ranking jobs in the league.
I think it brings up so many interesting questions, Maurice. One of the reasons I brought up the Katie Couric article is, the question of whether the media has darlings, whether certain people receive most favored nation status. In other words, in the Katie Couric, Ruth Bader Ginsburg article, it seems like Katie Couric is protecting Ruth Bader Ginsburg because she had, I think it says here, some harsh comments, I'm paraphrasing, some harsh comments regarding kneeling during the national anthem. And I say, well, is it a journalist's responsibility to try to protect somebody from their own comments? And then who gets protected and who doesn't get protected? And I wonder if we simply created transparency for everybody, if it would come out that unfortunately just about everybody, whether they're players, whether they're owners, whether they're officials, whether they're front office people, have transgressed in certain ways. And it makes me think maybe we should draw a line and say, let's start from now. I don't know if that's a good remedy. By the way, I don't disagree with you about Jon Gruden at all, but I wonder if the remedy is to say, look, we're going to start a zero tolerance point right now. Right now. We're not going to go back 7 years, but right now there's zero tolerance. You get shown to have said certain things or done certain things, you're gone. And to have it as kind of a equitable treatment across the board. Do you think that would work? Do you think the NFL is ready for that or not? That's part one. And part two, of course, is what now is the net effect on the Raiders organization in the wake of Jon Gruden being gone and why he is gone?
Well, I want to first touch on objectivity because I talk about this a lot with my co-host Scott Gilbranson on our radio shows, and we talked about yesterday how the NFL is so powerful that there won't be fair coverage. Some people are just going to sweep things under the rug, and you mentioned Katie Couric, and in journalism, period, there are just people who are out there who may do favors. They may protect certain people if they like you, and I know these are journalistic sins because as a journalist, to me, it's all about truth and objectivity, and that's how I cover the team. That's how I was taught to cover sports, period. But we all know that these things happen behind closed doors, and Katie Couric and what she did with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and just tying it to the NFL. I just know that a lot of reporters probably cover up things that should be out there that people should know, but don't make the light of day because you're protecting sources. You're protecting a league that you're probably making money off of at the moment, so you don't want to upset the apple cart. So while I think it's a journalistic sin, I do understand that it happens. As far as the effect of the Raiders and Jon Gruden resigning, listened to a lot of press conferences over the last week, and they're trying to paint a picture of, look, we lost our head coach, we lost the leader of our team, but we're going to move forward as planned. Expectations don't change. Our goals don't change. The Raiders do have a solid coaching staff. Rich Bisaccia is now taking over as the interim head coach in place of Jon Gruden. Now, their defensive coordinator, Gus Bradley, stays the same. Their offensive coordinator stays the same. Now he's calling plays for the Raiders. But as far as the Raiders are concerned, perception-wise, there are fans out there who are still upset. And I made this point yesterday in a couple of shows that Mark Davis needs to come out with a stronger statement, not because he needs to talk to the media. A lot of fans are thinking, oh, he doesn't need to talk to the media, and they're right. They don't need to do it. He doesn't need to come out for the media. He needs to come out to some of the fans that still have questions because some of the things that Jon Gruden did say in those emails, people are still they're in the dark about, and they have certain feelings about it. Paul Nassib, who's the openly gay player on the roster, had to take a day off because he felt a certain type of way about Jon Gruden's statements. He did return, but I would imagine that he had private conversations with Jon Gruden, and he probably felt betrayed. And I think some fans feel this way. Some fans who may be openly gay, some fans who may have daughters who are in sports, family members, female family members who are in sports, they probably feel a certain way. So I think Mark Davis, whose organization, the Raiders, has always stood for inclusion and just putting minorities in places of power, he needs to have a stronger statement. The other thing is a lot of questions asked to coaches and players could have been met for Mark Davis to answer, but since he's basically said, I have no comment, they asked the NFL, they have all the answers. Now the media is going to come to players and coaches and ask them the questions that they would have asked Mark Davis. Now, he comes out a little stronger with the statement. Some of those questions, those players and coaches wouldn't have to answer. They can focus more on the football aspect of their responsibilities because they do have the game against, they do have to continue on the season. So they do have to focus on football, and they shouldn't have to feel distracted with all the off-the-field matters if Mark Davis would have come out and step out and say, hey, I denounced this, or what he knew. Maybe he has to keep quiet because there's some litigation going on, but I think he has to make a stronger statement just for the perception of the Raiders organization. And again, as far as day-to-day matters, as far as the football aspect of things, the Raiders are going to try to move on as business as usual. As we all know, that's going to be difficult because Jon Gruden was the lead play caller there, and he did have a lot of personnel power. But they have Mike Mayock, who's come out as a strong leader. Rich Bisaccia, as I mentioned, is the interim head coach. He's come out, and he has shown strong leadership skills. And the Raiders do have a solid coaching staff. So I think they'll be competitive throughout the season, but it's going to take a couple of weeks for players and even coaches to get over this matter with Jon Gruden and his resignation.
A very interesting and a very important perspective you bring to the table, Maurice. Chris?
Maurice, given the history of a coach stepping down and a team continuing in the season, is there any, history in the NFL showing a positive effect of this, or is it more likely than not that this becomes a lackluster result? Can the Raiders still make the playoffs? Will they be able to do anything meaningful, or do you think that this is going to be a very challenging circumstance to get over?
Well, absolutely, this is going to be challenging, but I remember certain situations, maybe not specifically where coaches are fired or resign, and the team can use that as a rallying point for the rest of the season. Usually it happens at the end of the season, so usually you kind of know whether you're in the playoff picture or not. So if the team is not in the playoff picture, you they'll get a 1 week jolt of energy, and then it kind of dies down and they kind of go in the tank. This is different for the Raiders because when Jon Gruden resigned, it was only going into week 6. So you still had a lot of games left. And when Mike Mayock, general manager, stepped to the podium, he pointed that out. He said, look, we're 3-2, and we have 12 games left in the season. So we're not going in the tank. We still have the same expectations. So I expect to see the Raiders be competitive for the remainder of the season, though it will be tough initially because everything is still new and there's still kind of reports leaking out. It's going to be tough initially for the first few weeks, but I think as the season goes on, you're going to see a competitive football team because they're still talented. They still have Darren Waller, Derek Carr, who reportedly, according to Adam Schefter of ESPN, is going to approach the team about a contract extension in the offseason. So he has a lot to play for. He's playing for money, playing for his future. And, of course, there are a lot of uncertainties with Jon Gruden out because, again, as I said, he had a lot of personnel power. He had personnel power. He had the final say. So now you have a new leader of the organization, Mike Mayock. He came into the season saying that, look, we need to make the playoffs or I'm on the hot seat. I could be out of a job. So it's important for his team to do well because then he can keep his position, potentially move on, and have his say over the organization because, again, he did answer to Jon Gruden. So people are competing for jobs. People are still competing for positions. Their futures are still up in the air. So I think you're going to see a competitive team. You're going to see a lot. We'll see some moves, roster moves made now that Mike Mayock is in control and it's not Jon Gruden. So, again, I think it'll be tough. But the Raiders are not, I repeat, they're not going in the tank yet.
you should follow Maurice on Moton on Twitter to get all of the Raiders updates you would ever need, everything. He covers all the updates surrounding the NFL team. Maurice, thanks so much for being with us again on CY Interview. In closing, can you tell us about all the different sports reporting, writing, and broadcasting jobs you have done? And you have.
I cover all things NFL and Bleacher Report, as many know. Vegas Sports Today, I cover all things Raiders, where I put out a column twice a week. The Mightier 1090, I host a show with Scott Branson that airs Friday evenings at 6 p.m. Pacific time. I'm also on 98.5 The Fan in Las Vegas with Scott Branson that airs Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So if you want Raiders, Vegas Sports Today, The Mightier 1090, 98.5 The Fan in Las Vegas. If you want general NFL matters, Bleacher Report, that's where you can find me.
Oh, absolutely. So for NFL journalist Maurice Moton, featured columnist Jay Bilstein, and CY Interview, I'm Christian McMurray.